Good morning everyone, how's it going today? Welcome to this new tutorial on LangChain. In this tutorial we're going to be building this application that you see in front of you. It's very similar to the previous application that we had built in which we were able to ask questions to a PDF, just that in this case we're going to be asking questions to a CSV. Alright, this is a very educational video because not only are you going to be able to build this application yourselves, but this will also be useful for you as an introduction to the concept of agents in LangChain. Alright, so let me show you real quick how this works. In order to demonstrate this application, I'm going to use this dataset, the Breast Cancer Wisconsin dataset, which contains data from a lot of cells in different tissue samples, and we're going to be able to ask questions about this data. So I have downloaded it here. I will upload it, and then I'm going to be able to ask a question about this CSV. For example, I can ask a question, what is the mean radius of the malignant tumors in this CSV? And if I ask the question, you will see that first it starts to think itself, and then it's going to output an answer. The mean radius of the malignant tumors is 17.46. Right? I mean, it's very useful, it's very convenient, and I'm going to be explaining to you how agents works with a beautiful diagram and all. Alright, so stick to the end for that. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this video. Alright, so as usual, let me just tour you around the setup that we have here for our project. I have my main.py application right here, which is where I'm going to write all of the code. I have this pretty quick test that tests whether or not I'm importing my application. So if I am importing the application, this will not run. If I am executing it directly, then the main function will be executed, which is where all of my code is going to live. Then I have my gitignore file, just to tell Git which files I don't want to track. Then I have my .env.example, in which I have the example variables that I'm going to be needing for this project to work, in this case, we're going to be using on the OpenAI API, which is why I need this variable right here, which is OpenAI API key. Remember that when working with LangChain, we need the variable to be named exactly like this. It cannot be OpenAI key or OpenAI, etc. If we're working with LangChain, it has to be this exact name. And then I have my real.env file, which is the one that actually contains my secrets. Okay. If you want a more detailed explanation about the setup, just let me know. The API keys, you can of course get them from platform.openai.com. If you don't have an account, you're going to have to create one account, and then you're just going to have to click on API keys right here, and then create new secret key. You can give it a name, then create key, then you copy this, and you paste it right here. Alright? Alright, so that's it for the setup. Let's just start coding right now. Alright, so the first things that we're going to be doing is we're going to start creating our graphical user interface. Okay? In order to create this user interface, we're going to be using Streamlit, which is a very lightweight and very minimalist and intuitive way of creating graphical user interfaces in Python. In order to do that, of course, you're going to have it installed. So what you're going to do is do pip install Streamlit like this. I already have it installed, so it's not going to take a huge time for me, but to you it might take a little bit longer. And once that is done, you're going to have to do import Streamlit as st, because that's just the usual name we give it. And then right here, what we're going to do is we're going to st set page config. This is basically just going to allow us to tell Streamlit that this is a Streamlit application. I am actually going to disable Copilot because I always forget to do that before I start the videos. But alright, so st set main page config. Alright. Then right here, this function can actually take several parameters, but in our case, we're just going to give it one parameter, which is the page title. And we're going to say, ask your CSV. And then why not, let's add a little emoji right here of a of a chart. Yeah, like this. There you go. Now, in order to create a title or a header, you're just going to do header, st header like this, and then just your title. I'm going to say ask your CSV as well. Then just use the same emoji. There you go. And then, of course, afterwards, we're going to have to read our CSV. Streamlit comes with a very convenient input element, which you can call just by saying st.fileUploader. I mean input. When I say input, I mean file uploader. Sorry about that. And here it takes a label. We're going to call it upload your CSV file like this. And then I'm going to specify the type of file that I expect to get from here. And let's say that I'm going to store the object that the user is going to upload in a variable called user CSV. There you go. Now, if I save it, I'm going to be able to come back here and I'm going to be able to do Streamlit run, and then I can just run my main.py. There you go. And I have my application right here. Now, as you can see, just with a very few lines, I was able to create this very quick graphical user interface with Python, which already is able to take my CSV file. However, so far we're only able to upload the CSV file, but we're not able to do much more than that. So let's add a little bit more functionality to that and actually do something with the CSV file. All right. All right. So now that our application already has a CSV in itself and is able to use it to do things, we're going to be using a LangChain agent in order to actually parse it and to read it. Okay. Why do we need a language agent? Because a CSV file is not readable by a language model, right? It's not like a PDF file. Like if you remember in our previous video, and if you haven't watched it, I invite you to watch it. In our previous video, we only had text, and our language model can take text and can read it and can understand it. But a CSV file is basically just a table with data, and the language model is not able to understand it. What we're going to do in order to be able to read a CSV file is to take our language model to understand the question that we are asking and to have it generate the actions that it has to perform in order to understand the CSV file. For example, our agent is going to be able to perform actions in this way. Let's say, like taken from the official documentation, if we have our agent, we're going to be using the create CSV agent pre-built agent from LangChain. Then we're going to create it like this. And if we run it, let's say, for example, if we want to say how many rows are there, the agent is going to be able to think by itself and say, oh, it's asking me how many rows there are, so I need to count the number of rows. Then it's going to be able to perform an action on this CSV file, and then it's going to be able to observe the output of that action. In our case, the action that it performed was to execute the function len, which returns the length of your data frame. And now it is once it reads the output of that action, it's going to be able to think again and to give you a final answer. And this is very convenient because that makes the agent pretty autonomous, and it allows you to ask somewhat complex questions about your CSV file. Okay. Here's here's a more complete example. For example, what is the square root of the average age? So it'll first think that it has to calculate the average age, then it has to then it knows how to calculate the mean. But as you can see, it's not actually knowing how to do. It doesn't know the data right by reading it from the CSV. It has to think in order to get the data. Okay, let me show you a quick diagram of how this works. All right, so there we go. I confected this really quick diagram just to show you what is actually happening. An agent in general, I mean, this is an introduction to any agent, not just to our particular CSV agent, which is built to be able to perform actions using pandas and other libraries on the dataset. An agent is basically a tool that is able to make decisions by itself and to use tools to interact with its environment. Okay. In this diagram, as you can see, an agent works like this. Let's say we are our user, and our user makes an input. The input can be a question or something like that. In our example, it can be, what is the age of Leonardo DiCaprio's girlfriend to the 0.43 power? All right. Then the agent, of course, he doesn't know that. But in order to think of a solution, it's going to use a language model. From our question, it's going to think that, oh, I need to find who is Leonardo DiCaprio's girlfriend. And then from that thought, it's going to be able to choose a tool from a set of tools that it has available. Let's say that it can have a calculator, a coding interface, or, for example, the web. It might be able to search the web or things like that, okay? In our case, since it doesn't know who is Leonardo DiCaprio's girlfriend, it's going to go and search the web. Then, there you go, it searches the web, and then it finds out that his girlfriend is Camila Morone, for example. And then it's going to read that output from the tool that it used, and it's going to interpret the output. It's going to be able to ask itself, do I already have the solution? And then again, through the language model, it's going to be able to think, and it's going to be able to say, oh no, I still don't have the answer. And if it doesn't have the answer, it's going to go back to this step right here. And it's going to be like, all right, so I need to use another tool. And then it's going to select a new tool. Now it's going to be like, all right, so now I know who is his girlfriend. Now I'm going to, maybe it's going to have to use the search web tool again in order to be like, all right, so what's the age of Camila? And then once he has the age, he's going to come back and be like, all right, and I now have the age. What do I need now? I need to elevate it to the power of 0.43. And this time it may not use the search web tool. It's going to be able to use the calculator tool. And then once it has that final solution, it's going to be able, again, by using our language model that in our example is OpenAI. I mean the GPT-3 from OpenAI, but in your computer, you might want to do it using AutoGPT or GPT for all. And then it's going to be able to generate a solution and then read that solution to us. And that's exactly what is happening in our CSV agent, is taking the CSV and being like, all right, so I need to do this. And then it's going to be selecting the tools to use and then reading the output of whatever it did. And this is like the most basic explanation that I can think of to how agents work and what is that we're going to be doing exactly right now. So let me show you how this looks actually in the code in our application. Okay, let's do that. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is that whenever the user already has uploaded their CSV, we're going to test that that CSV is actually uploaded. If user CSV is not none, then we're going to be able to use it. And in order to use it, we need the user to ask a question. So I'm going to be like user question. And the user question is going to be a very simple text input, something like this. Text input that comes. This is a component from Streamlit. And I'm going to say, ask a question about your CSV. All right. There you go. Now, if we look at how this looks like, let me just open the terminal and just run it again. Remember that in order to run a Streamlit application, you have to do Streamlit run and then your file. You cannot do just like Python and then your file. That will not actually execute the Streamlit application. So there you go. Now, if we upload our CSV file, we're going to be able to ask a question, but so far it doesn't do anything. So let's do something with that question that the user gave us. And in order to do something, we're going to be actually needing LangChain. So as I mentioned before, we're going to be using the pre-built LangChain agent called we're going to be importing it from LangChain.agents. And we're going to import create CSV agent. And then from LangChain LLMs, which is the language models, we're going to be able to import OpenAI. Now, I am using OpenAI, but it is in this step that you can actually use whichever language model you want. LangChain has support for a huge deal of language models. If you come right here to modules, agents, to models, and then in models, if you go to LLMs and you go to integrations, you'll see the huge list that they have for language model providers. Okay, so yeah, don't hesitate to use your whichever you want. Now, what I'm going to do as well is I'm going to import from .env. Oh, in order to do this, actually, I'm going to need to pip install python.env, which is the package that is going to allow me to read the variables from my .env file. Okay, and in order to do that, I'm going to have to import from .env. I'm going to import load.env, and in order to enable these variables to actually be read, I'm going to have to execute this function at the beginning of my file. Okay, now LangChain should be able to get this API key without myself doing anything else. Okay, all right, so now we have imported our language model and our agent, so we're going to initialize our agent. In order to do that, I'm going to first initialize my language model. I'm going to say that my language model is going to be OpenAI, and this, in the case of OpenAI, this one takes several parameters, which are optional. In my case, I'm going to set a temperature of 0. I believe it used to go from 0 to 10, but in LangChain, apparently it's from 0 to 1. So 0 is non-creative and 1 is completely creative. A good way to think about this is that if you set it to 0, it's going to return exactly the same thing every time you send the same prompt. If you set it to the maximum, it's going to be more creative and give different answers every time. All right, I'm just going to set it to 0, and then once that I have my language model, I'm going to be able to initialize it inside of my agent. So, I'm going to initialize a variable called agent, and I'm going to use my create CSV agent function that I imported from LangChain just a moment ago. And this function takes my language model that I previously created as the first parameter. And secondly, it takes the file, the CSV file that I'm going to be using. And remember, the CSV file, I saved it right here from the file uploader. I'm just going to pass it right here. And why do I have a problem? Positional cannot appear after keyword. All right, so just not going to use, there you go. I'm just going to be using only positional arguments. And then last but not least, I'm just going to set a verbose option to true. What does this do? Verbose actually just do you remember that when we had our example right here, we see the green text right here with all the thinking process of the model, of the agent. This is basically just going to print that at the same time. If we set it to false, it's not going to print anything, it's just going to do it by itself. All right? Something that you might want to consider right here is that in particular about the CSV agent, our model is actually running code, okay? So it's using pandas or other libraries to get information about our data set. So it's running code by itself. This can potentially be quite dangerous if you make it write code that is malicious for your file or something like that. Okay, so just keep that in mind, that it's running code by itself. It's not asking anyone for permission to execute the code. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Once we have that, we're going to be able to actually use this agent to answer our question. So if we have our question, let me just show you so far, like right now, what this looks like. I'm going to do if my question is not none and my question is different to nothing. I'm going to just write your question was, and then the user question. I'm going to just wrap it within f string. Then let's remember that we have to, in order to run it, we do streamlit run main. There you go. Now I can actually upload my CSV, then ask a question, hello, and then your question was hello. Okay, everything seems to be working correctly. Now we can actually use our model to treat that question right here. Okay, so in order to do that, right here, we're going to have our response. And the response is going to come from our agent. All right, so in order to do that, we need to call our agent first. So we're going to do agent.run in order for it to run some instructions. And right here, we're basically just going to tell it the question that our user has. And so in order to do that, we're just going to pass in the user question right here. And then if I save this, and actually, you know what? I'm not going to run this right here. I'm going to run it at a terminal or just beside it to show you the thinking process at the same time as it's reading the file. Okay, so I am right here. This is exactly the same directory as where I am in my code. So in order to do that, I'm just going to do, as usual, streamlit run. In my file is mine.py. And as you can see, it runs just like usual. There you go. And now what I'm going to do, let me just put this one right here, this one to the right. There you go. There you go. Now I'm going to upload my CSV file. I'm just going to put myself right here. And then now I'm actually able to ask questions. So I can say the previous question that we asked before was, what is the mean radius of a malignant tumor, Then if I click enter, I'm going to see all the thinking that our agent is doing right here. So let's see, the thought is I need to find the mean radius of the malignant tumor. So it can actually think, and it has to decide what it's going to do. Now it decided to use the Python interpreter as a tool, and it passed this input. So, I mean, this is going to return the mean value of the radius for the malignant cells, and there you go. So now, once that it executes this, it can read the observation, then it can think. Now I have the final answer, and then it can just return the final answer in our program. We can actually test it a little bit further. We can ask what is the mean area of malignant tumors, or how about something a little bit different? The mean, what is the mean smoothness of benign tumors, for example? If I click enter, you can see that it's going to think again. Well, I already run something here. You can see I need to find the mean smoothness of benign tumors. Again, it thinks that it has to use the Python interpreter. It runs this code, it observes the answer, and then it thinks, I now know the answer. and then it just gives you the answer using the language model. Okay. So yeah, I mean, this is how to build this very quick application and a very quick introduction to agents. So there you have it. I hope this was a good introduction to the concept of agents. I hope that you liked this application. I will leave in the description the link to the repository on GitHub so that you can download it and play with it, play around with it. I don't recommend that you copy and paste the code from there. I recommend that you actually write it yourself so that you can, it gets into your head. And yeah, I hope that it was educational, and please subscribe for more videos about AI and software development. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.